All right, so welcome to the final Rokwire lecture of the season. This has been a nice series. We've had a number of different topics, and this is a rescheduled talk from October. Today, we're going to talk about social science in the Rokwire platform, or social science research in the Rokwire platform. Our speaker is Dr. Peter Ondish. He's from the Center of Social and Behavioral Sciences at the U of I here, and they do a lot of things with applied social science and promoting social science research around campus. So I hope we have a nice interdisciplinary crowd today. Pete's been working with Rokwire for, I think, maybe the last year or so, and he's going to talk a little bit about the initiative that they have with Rokwire. So Pete, if you would share your screen and you can take it away.
Of course, thank you, Bradley. Okay, so can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. So I'm talking today about the partnership that the Research Center, the Center for Social and Behavioral Science has with the Rokwire team, and to discuss kind of what we've done so far and what our vision is for our collaboration going forward. This talk will be probably around 20-25 minutes, and then I'd love to open it up for some discussion and Q&A with the remaining time. So first, for some of our folks who in the audience who aren't familiar with Rokwire, maybe some of the folks from the social science disciplines, Rokwire is an open source platform that's for mobile devices. The goal of Rokwire is to enable smart, healthy communities by providing the tools that allow social scientists, computer scientists, or anybody who's interested, the ability to create apps and various technologies on their smartphones in a way that's scalable, in a way that preserves privacy, in a way that's relatively cost effective. The ultimate goal of Rokwire was to address the potential of the information age. You have all of these different devices that we're connected to, and this is only going to increase as time goes on. Things like our smartphones, our smartwatches, digital sensors in the environment that are becoming more and more prevalent. And there has to be a way to kind of capture all this data and use it for better decision making, to allow people to better achieve their goals, to increase health, well-being, the financial capabilities of people around us. This is kind of one of the big goals of the Rokwire platform and the Rokwire team. The problem in reaching this goal, however, is that every data source that you might have, be it data that's collected from a hospital or some place that measures well-being, or some kind of environmental sensor, such as a sensor that measures the air quality. All of these different data sources are siloed, meaning that they can't really talk to each other, and you can't really relate, for example, individual data with public transit use or hospital data with environmental air quality. All of these data sources are always built kind of in a way that's meant to preserve the privacy within the silo that the data lives. So obviously, if you're at a hospital, you don't want the data leaving outside the hospital. That poses all kinds of privacy and security risks. And if you're collecting data on environmental air quality, you obviously don't have any real way of connecting that to other things about what individuals are doing or what services they're seeking. All of these data live in these kind of silos, and there's no way to connect them. Even more so, like, these are issues that companies like Microsoft and Amazon don't really have to face, in part because they build their data architecture in ways that are meant to preserve the security and the integrity of the privacy of the data within their own kind of warehouses. So if you're, for example, Microsoft, you might be worried about the data security on Microsoft servers, but you're not necessarily concerned with, okay, how do we move data from Microsoft server and connect it to a university or connect it to a hospital while preserving the data's integrity and the privacy of the individuals who own that data. Companies don't have to worry about that because they're just worried about the data's integrity within the silo. So if you want to connect all of these different dots, you kind of need a different way of thinking about data security and data privacy, and you need to build much more sophisticated tools that will allow for these different entities to talk and share data. Again, all in service of the potential of the digital age. Rokwire has a solution for this problem. This is kind of what Rokwire is meant to do. Ironically, it doesn't start with a technology solution, though. It actually starts with a user and a privacy-centric solution. And the way in which Rokwire thinks about this problem is, okay, well, if we're going to start connecting all of these different dots and allow people to connect data sources from places that hadn't been connected, we need to rethink the way in which users relate to their data, the way in which data is preserved, and the way in which privacy is maintained. Rokwire does this by allowing users to actually own their own data, which is a very different and relatively revolutionary way of thinking about the way in which people relate to their own data. In a Rokwire system, a user is always given full control over their own data and allowed to determine if the data lives in the system or if the data is deleted and pulled from the system forever. Moreover, data that's stored in Rokwire or that's connected within the broader Rokwire ecosystem is never sold under any circumstances. And the goal here is to maximize user consent, user choice, and user control over their own data. If we're going to make the next step into that broader world where we have smart cities that are connected with data that allow people to navigate their social worlds, better understand the environment around them, that allow for them to make better decisions, and that help kind of curate research and public institutions that prioritize their well-being and their safety, then we need to try to rethink the way in which people are able to control and be the curators of their own data. So that's kind of the philosophy that underlies the Rokwire solution from a personal and privacy-centric perspective. On top of that perspective, Rokwire builds the technological backbone. Now, there are a few features here that make Rokwire important and interesting. Number one, this is a free and open to use platform. So it's not going to cost any money if you want to build an app, for example, on the Rokwire platform. And the ultimate goal is to help use these modular blocks that significantly streamline the development. So if you wanted to right now, if you're a researcher or if you want to create your own app for any other purpose, you would have to try to create the app probably from scratch, which would require a lot of resources and time, particularly on the developmental end, to code and program the various functionalities and the security behind that platform. But by creating this free open source platform that has these modular blocks, you can very quickly and easily grab particular functions that maybe other people have created, such as a login or something that allows you to create groups or something that allows you to connect to various other data streams, and plug it into your smartphone application in a way that's relatively streamlined. You can almost think of it like the difference between trying to code a website from scratch versus going to a service like Squarespace, where you just kind of drag and drop the different features that you want into your website. The difference, of course, being that this is a free and open source platform where anybody is able to build those different devices rather than being a service that's owned by a company that licenses it out and sells their data and owns your data. The way in which Rokwire achieves this is with a certain technology known as a hardware secure enclave. The goal behind a hardware secure enclave is to create a solution that maintains the data security and the privacy while allowing it to connect to various different other sources. So the privacy-centric backbone that focuses on the user, plus the technological backbone that gives researchers and developers the ability to create these kinds of apps in a streamlined way and in a way that's free, is kind of the joint beauty of what Rokwire brings to the table and how it achieves its goal, or it plans to achieve this goal of seizing on the opportunity of the information age to usher in that kind of new world of smart cities. These are some kind of screenshots that you might see if you're in a Rokwire type app. These are actually taken from the Safer Illinois app, which was the app that the Rokwire team helped create to manage the COVID-19 pandemic here on campus. And so you might see some information like you see on the right-hand side with your smartphone, asking you to set your privacy level, where you can go for the most features with the least amount of privacy, or you can prioritize your own privacy and say, I don't necessarily need all these features. I really want to preserve kind of my privacy. But the goal here is to give users the control over how much they want to share their data. And again, obviously, to kind of empower the user to be the owner of their own data and to be able to have the final decision as to whether or not their data is utilized by the Rokwire system. So Rokwire has obviously already created the Safer Illinois app. This was the app that was used, again, to manage the COVID-19 pandemic here on campus. This is being phased out, and it is we are returning now, the Rokwire team, to the creation of the Illinois app, which was originally what they were supposed to be working on, a year and a half ago, but the COVID-19 pandemic introduced a unique kind of challenge, and the Rokwire team kind of threw themselves behind the efforts to help manage the pandemic. But now we're moving on to think more about the Illinois app, which is broadly meant to help kind of curate the student experience and acts as kind of that test bed for the creation of a smart city, in terms of allowing students the opportunity to control their own data and giving them, recommendations for things to do, allowing them to better manage their finances, their transport, their health and well-being, their schedule, and pretty much anything that you could imagine that could be created in a digital open source system like this. These are only the first 2 apps that have been created, though, and we see opportunity for many more. And in addition to the many more different apps that could be created on the Rokwire platform, we've also since partnered with different universities who are interested in using this open source technology. Again, one of the real beauties of what Rokwire is doing is creating this free to use open source platform so that our partners at places like University of Lincoln, University of Wisconsin, American University, Vanderbilt, they can use the Rokwire platform and build on it as a collective community rather than as being a closed system or a centralized entity that kind of controls and owns all of the data and what it does and the functionality and everything else. This allows for a type of scalability that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise in a centralized type system. So I've talked a lot about the Rokwire platform, what its mission is, the goals that it has. It's useful now to think about, okay, what is the CSBS, the Center for Social and Behavioral Science, and what are our mission? What is our mission, our goals, and how does that align with what Rokwire is doing, and how does that shape our partnership? So the CSBS is a relatively new research center. We're actually housed in the observatory here on campus. And we have 3 overarching goals. Number 1, we want to better leverage our collective expertise to bring in more external funding resources. So we support research that's being done here on campus. And we also help lead in some research initiatives on our own, and then bring in faculty members who are interested in doing that research, and we kind of share in those victories together. The second thing that we do is we support our social and behavioral scientists with things like training and community building. So we put on a lot of workshops. Some of you might have been at the most recent CSBS Misinformation Symposium, which was last Friday. We brought in different misinformation researchers from campus and had them share their research in flash talks, and then we kind of organize them into different groups to talk about, possible collaborations. We do a lot of methods workshops as well. So we've done methods workshops in things like, for example, structural equation modeling. And then the third thing that the Center for Social and Behavioral Science does is attempt to enhance our public engagement. So for example, with nonprofit community organizations in the state of Illinois, the way in which we've been doing this is by taking a community-centric approach and bringing a listening ear to what the community's needs are, thinking about how we can serve those needs first and foremost, and really prioritizing them in most everything that we do. When we first started here at the center, we had a goal of doing more and doing better community engagement than we have before. So we kind of started in this enterprise by just meeting with different organizations like the United Way, the City of Champaign, and hearing about what their experience has been working with the university and hearing about what their needs are kind of going forward. We've done a lot of work with these community partners, and it's helped engender a lot of the trust that has been missing sometimes between them and the university. So our goal is to enhance that public engagement by helping not only ourselves, but our researchers do that public engagement better, and connecting, for example, people who are in the community with researchers who are going to be able to think about their needs and be good collaborators on particular projects. So what does all of this mean for the ways in which CSBS aims to partner with Rokwire? The first is in terms of tech-engaged social behavioral science research. And we see the center as operating in this space in two main ways. First, we think that the CSBS has the potential to lead certain proposals and then bring in other researchers when they feel like they would be able to assist in those. We've already done this twice, maybe even more if you count some of the other applications that we've sent in but haven't gone anywhere. But one is with Smart and Connected Communities Call through the National Science Foundation, where we've partnered with PIs Alan and Garth in the School of Social Work and the Department of Psychology. And then another with the DOJ Research and Evaluation Initiative, where we're aiming to, in these two initiatives, first, use the Rokwire platform to address community violence. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And in the DOJ case, to use the Rokwire platform specifically to reduce gender-based violence. So we see ourselves as being able to lead proposals in this particular space and then bring in other researchers who would be interested in a supporting role. The second thing though, and this probably relates to more of the social behavioral science community here, is we see ourselves as being able to be ambassadors to the many different social behavioral scientists that exist on campus by connecting them and helping catalyze social behavioral science research in the Rokwire platform by developing certain apps or using the new technology in a way that you wouldn't be able to do research otherwise. We hope to also bridge connections between our community partners who are in the community who would be interested in working with the university researchers and seeing that those are collaborations that are supported and stabilized. We see all kinds of potential for overlap between the social behavioral science researchers that are here and the Rokwire team. And we think about the different kinds of overlaps in terms of people who want to study things like student success, student health, transportation. How do people think about groups? Health and well-being obviously are always going to be central. We see lots of opportunity for the Center for Social and Behavioral Science to facilitate collaborations where other researchers here on campus are able to utilize the Rokwire platform to really take their research into new directions where it could have never gone otherwise, based on the unique properties of the Rokwire platform. And let me give you a couple examples of what we mean by kind of leading in some of these research areas and proposing research that's new and unique. So we are currently part of an NSF Smart and Connected Communities grant funded by the National Science Foundation. We've partnered in this grant with the City of Champaign, the Rokwire team and the Siebel Center for Design, researchers on campus who investigate interpersonal violence. And then we've also partnered with community scientists who are individuals who live within the community, but who are close to the violence-related problem in Champaign. We've created this large team to investigate the ways in which we can use the Rokwire platform to address crime and violence in Champaign-Urbana and to build community here in town. This research is taking on two distinct flavors right now. First, we're thinking about ways in which we can build build community and reduce crime and violence, and asking the questions: how can we make a smart city out of the Rokwire platform in a way that's effective at reducing community violence. A lot of other research right now that attempts to do this, we're not the first to try to create an app or a technology that's tried to reduce violence. But we are probably one of the first and one of the only to have a really interdisciplinary team of social and behavioral scientists who are evaluating the work that's being done, of computer scientists and engineers who are able to build compelling technologies, and community members who are there at the table at the decision-making process and are helping steer the project. So we're getting together this interdisciplinary team to envision the ways we can use the Rokwire platform to reduce crime and violence. We also know that technology can have unintended consequences, such as it increases victim blaming when you kind of give people the power to report certain incidences or do certain things or utilize certain services. We know, for example, that it tends to increase victim blaming. So we're asking ourselves questions like, how can we measure and reduce these unintended consequences in using our platform? In addition, though, we have to consider what are the concerns of privacy and security that come with the community. Now, as I mentioned before, we are not the first to, we're not the inventors of the hardware secure enclave, the technology that's meant to preserve privacy and security. But Rokwire is unique in what it's doing in terms of attempting to connect different organizations and different data streams using that technology. If you're Microsoft, you can just keep your data in a secure server and it's not really going to go anywhere. And you are pretty able to minimize security risks. But it's an interesting and it's a new problem when you try to connect different data streams. So we're trying to think about the technology that's needed to extend the privacy, technology into those different areas. So one of the questions that we're asking this grant is, how can we create that open source framework that allows others to easily and modularly build civic applications while still doing it in a way that preserves privacy, in a way that prioritizes the user and their ownership of their own data and maintains the trust between individuals who are using the Rokwire platform and the platform itself. We obviously see this as being just a test case, though, of the ways in which we can use the technology to create something that's scalable to broader communities. So we're already thinking about the different ways, for example, that we might be able to scale it to other cities if it is effective, like Rantoul or Chicago more broadly. And what are the other kinds of civic applications that we can use the Rokwire platform for? The goal of all of this is to provide open source, community maintained technologies that can serve in the place of other ones. So right now, for example, in our conversations with community partners and thinking about the ways that we could reduce violence, particularly gun violence in Champaign-Urbana, we've heard from a lot of people that the organizers of some of our service organizations, they use tools like Facebook to communicate with each other, and that they're not necessarily happy about that because they don't really trust Facebook. They feel like they're worried about their data, and they don't like the fact that they don't really own it and they can't really control ultimately what they're doing and how they're communicating. So this is a really unique opportunity and exactly the kind of case that we would like to see Rokwire excel at, because we have the opportunity to create a technology that is community owned and community run. And we feel like that's a qualitatively different thing than what is at the table now. The second way in which we feel like we could meaningfully collaborate, we at the center with the Rokwire team, is by transforming Rokwire into a social behavioral science research vehicle. We think we're well positioned to do this. We're a pretty diverse team of social behavioral scientists ourselves, but we're also extremely well connected to social behavioral scientists across many different departments and in many different colleges here on campus. We also are, I think, uniquely positioned to engage students as citizen scientists and research participants by working through the the Rokwire team and the Siebel Center for Design. And we hope to eventually connect the Rokwire team to this diverse and representative social behavioral science faculty areas who think that they would really like to be at the table as well. So if you're a social behavioral scientist and you happen to be in the area of socio-emotional development or mental and behavioral health or academic achievement, and you feel like there is something that is unique about your experience as a researcher and you would like to try to contribute to Rokwire as a research platform, then we can help connect you to them and see that your voice is elevated into the Rokwire platform. We see lots of different areas where our faculty members would be effective at doing this. So one area obviously relates to student success. A lot of individuals from different departments and different colleges are interested in, for their research, investigating student success, be they, what are the things that predict it? How do people from different cultures navigate the student experience? And one particular research area that's gotten a lot of interest over the last 15 or 20 years or so is, why do first generation students underperform relative to continuing generation students? And there's been a lot of research on this about processes dealing with identity, about motivation, about how people relate to their peers and their institutions. And there's a potential for Rokwire to address or take this kind of research to a different level. Having access to the students and being able to integrate with their schedules, you'd be able to investigate these kinds of research questions in ways that you wouldn't be able to otherwise, and maybe even generate solutions that you wouldn't be able to through the methods that are available now. So research now could ask, could curating peer-hosted study groups where first-generation students establish peer networks help maintain their academic success? This is a kind of research question that Rokwire would be uniquely positioned to help researchers manage. Another example related to health and well-being, one of the classic problems in the health industry is how do you get people to get their flu vaccine? You can imagine how this kind of question has gained new relevance in the COVID-19 pandemic. But one diagnosis for this problem has to do with identity, another has to do with motivation, another has to do with the fact that, hey, people have generally positive attitudes towards vaccines, but those sometimes rarely translate into specific behaviors because attitudes can be quite general, but behaviors happen in a very specific time, in a very specific place, and under very specific and many environmental circumstances. So a researcher might want to ask the question, how can creating a prompt that asks students to select specific times and places where they plan to get their vaccine increase the uptake? Rokwire being connected to the many different undergrads that are here at the university would empower a researcher to ask this question in a way and measure their outcomes in ways that they might not be able to otherwise. In the third area, and where we see Rokwire and the Center for Social and Behavioral Science collaborating, is on process-centric research. So not necessarily research that's related to any PI's particular research goal or their agenda, but in terms of providing the backbone to drive user outcomes right here at the university. So this is thinking about research, obviously, that needn't necessarily be published, that is more a service to the university and to our students, and in terms of fulfilling our responsibility as a land-grant institution. Rokwire, again, aims to make smarter cities, which include people that are healthier and cities that are more sustainable. And all of this requires a social behavioral science-informed approach, right? So you can't investigate student success, you can't investigate health and well-being, you can't investigate sustainability, how people navigate the legal system, what engenders positive student experiences, as well as a host of any other thing under the sun that makes that smart and healthy city smart and healthy without really understanding social and behavioral science. These are social and behavioral science questions on a foundational level. So we believe that we can help connect the Rokwire team to different social and behavioral scientists that are interested in providing, for example, key consulting on how to measure some of these constructs, ways to design studies, and help drive some of these outcomes here at the university, ultimately in helping them drive these outcomes at different universities and in cities themselves. The CSBS has already started with some of this research, and so forgive my slightly blurry picture, but we began back in the fall of 2020 with a longitudinal mental health study. I'm just showing you data over the past over a few month time period where we were investigating the mental health of different students here on campus during the COVID-19 pandemic. But this is exactly the kind of research that the university is interested in terms of thinking about, what are our student outcomes? Are they doing well in school? Are they being healthy? And we see the CSBS as being able to connect the Rokwire team to researchers who are interested in doing this kind of research as facilitated by our team of behavioral scientists. So going forward, we're open to feedback. This is an emerging partnership. So we're interested, for example, in hearing from faculty members about what their concerns are, about ways in which they feel like Rokwire could be used as a platform, and also interested in hearing from faculty members that might be interested in beta testing a research tool. With that, I would like to pause and open it up to thoughts, feedback, and general questions from the audience.
Thank you, Peter. That was a great talk, and I think there's a lot to follow up on there. So thank you once again. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat or you can speak up. I think we can hear you if you turn your mic on and unmute yourself. So we have any questions? Okay, Brent.
Hi, Pete. Great talk. I was curious your thoughts about the behavior change and the ways in which some of the principles of behavior change, which you're quite an expert on, can be folded into the Rokwire platform, and whether they should be or not, and what are some of the ethics and ethical issues that go along with that.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. There are a lot of different ways where the behavior change could be implemented into the Rokwire platform. One context would be in a particular faculty member's research if they want to investigate, for example, a nudge or a certain type of messaging and seeing how that relates to some kind of change in student behavior, like utilizing a service here on campus or getting a vaccine or something of that nature. And I think it would have to be contextualized as this is research, like you can see these messages, but or what level of participation would you like to have in that kind of research? I think the goal would be to hear from all of the students and hear from the various faculty what the concerns are that they would have, and to think about what kinds of functionality they would like it to have, and just make sure that the students and the users are prioritized throughout that, so that regardless of what kind of flavor that behavior change initiative takes, if it's faculty research, if it's process-centric research, if it's whatever, that students feel like they have the power to opt into those kinds of messages, to be a part of that research going forward. Does that answer your question? I don't know if it did.
In part. I think I'd be really curious about some of the nudge type things, some of the default option work that's been done. I know they're popular, if controversial, and I was curious about their use in an app like this.
I think it depends on, exactly what the particular nudge or intervention is going to be. But regardless of what it is, I think so long as students are, adequately informed, that they're given control over their data, that they're known and, they're told in advance that these are things that could be done, and they're appropriately debriefed if anything is done. One of the goals of the Rokwire platform is to prioritize the user here. And a lot of students want to take part in the scientific process. But if you can create a way that allows them to be more present isn't the right word, but if you allow them to have more of a sense of ownership in that process, where I'm a willing participant, where I control my data, where I am opting into these things on my own volition, then we think that there is a potential for a lot of people to want to participate in those kinds of studies.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? I have a question. So at the beginning of the talk, you talked about how things are siloed in different places. And so, like data currently are siloed, so you can't necessarily access one type of data and link it to another easily. So, I think this is great. We talked about this in the first talk where, that is a barrier to a lot of things where, you're bringing people from across campus and bringing them into, a singular application, or you want to get them to come together to do something collectively. So do you have any thoughts about have you thought about that at all? I mean, in terms of how it might relate to your application domain?
Can you make the question a little bit more specific?
Oh, I guess, there's all this silo data out there. And so, what are the things, if you thought about how you might overcome this barrier for some of the things you want to do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's kind of one of the big aims of Rokwire is to try to figure out ways in which you can take that siloed data and connect it to another type of siloed data while still maintaining its privacy and its security. You can always, find ways to, connect those two data streams. The big question is, how do you do that while maintaining the user privacy measures that are inherent to one system or another? That's kind of like the real challenge. And I think it's one of the things that's kind of underlying all of Rockwire's broader efforts.
Yeah. Okay, Mustafa has a question. So would you like to unmute yourself?
Thank you so much. And thank you for the wonderful presentation, Peter. My question is, I work with the office programs, and we are very much interested in developing a mobile application to individualize the learning experience for our students. And by students, I mean we work a variety of international schools all over the globe, from Egypt, China, Turkey, whatever country you can name it. And we are trying to to exert more effort to engage them and to enhance the learning experience online. So as far as I understand, for Rokwire, you develop mobile applications and through the open source platform, right? If yes, this is usually, so the technical part or the development part usually done by you as the technical expertise, or I need to basically have a UI UX developer or mobile or developer to be able to help me build an application through your open source platform.
Yeah,
does this make any sense to you?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's a good question. I think the plan right now, but if there's anyone who's on the call who's more knowledgeable about this, I think the plan right now is that you would still need like a developer of your own, to be able to take the open source platform, the software and the features that are on there, and kind of curate it into exactly what it is that you want it to do. There might be a goal into the future, and I think obviously we want to make it as accessible to social behavioral scientists as well, some of which might not be, experts, in the areas where they would need to be to develop their own app. But the goal would be eventually to get to a point where it's as easy as possible for someone who doesn't have the technical expertise. But I think right now it's still at the stage where some of that technical expertise is needed to kind of take it from where it is and get it to its final destination. But with the understanding that it's significantly streamlined compared to how much work and time and the financial costs that it would be otherwise.
Looks like Bill has a question.
Well, I just wanted to pipe in, Peter. Thank you so much for your lovely talk, and I just wanted to pipe in on that last point, which is that in order to contribute to the code, you need to be able to write code, and so we're making as many opportunities possible that for people to participate in a whole range of issues and efforts around what we're trying to do. The code is open, it's open source, and people can go to our GitHub site and download it and tinker around in it with it. We're making advances in the coming months to make that even easier and provide more and better documentation. But I don't think we're going to get to the point where somebody like me could be able to make a significant addition to the code, because I just don't speak that language.
Yeah, I think that's a stumbling block to some extent, but this is something that we also need domain experts to say, this is what we want to do. And, it's a matter of just putting it into code. Sometimes you can tell a developer what you want and they can do it. Other times, you may need to have a little bit more of a, so this is where, we can, sort of mediate between people with domain expertise and people who know how to code this stuff really well, and, try to facilitate some of those interactions, because they're very, sometimes it's just things that you would never think of as a coder that have to be included or have to be done in a way. Similarly, if you're a domain expert, you don't know how to, the best data structure, for example, to execute something that you want to do. So yeah, it's a stumbling block, but something we can overcome. Did we have any other questions?
This is Joe. Hi, Peter. I don't know if you can talk about this, but I wondered if you can say anything about the techniques that you are using in the violence reduction research, or planning to use. Like how does that work? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's a good question. The grant that we have right now is just a planning grant. So a lot of it is actually answering the questions of, what direction do we want the research to take, and what kind of applications can we build. I can say that our team has identified 4 sort of broad opportunity areas that are the results of many different conversations from around 30 or so different community partners here in the Champaign-Urbana area, many of whom are directly related to or have direct efforts with the violence reduction efforts here in Champaign. And the 4 opportunity areas center along things like facilitating peer mentorship, about providing or thinking about ways in which we can intervene when people are in these kind of hot-headed states of mind and they're not really thinking clearly. Something has kind of disturbed them and they're really angry or upset at somebody, and trying to intervene in those moments. Another area where we're thinking of potentially creating something is in the area of allowing our service providers to better communicate and coordinate and share resources amongst each other. So not necessarily focusing on individuals in the community, but building, very, very directly on top of the service providers who are already here in the community doing that kind of research and doing that kind of work. And just allowing them to better share resources and communicate better, because right now they're all very siloed. And from some of the conversations that we've had, a lot of them are kind of not rowing in the same direction. Everyone's kind of doing their own thing and they're working in parallel. So Rokwire has, for example, in that case, a unique potential to allow these different community service providers to connect in ways that they hadn't been able to connect before by sharing information or resources, and kind of focusing on a particular key outcome. So that's one kind of area, but a lot of it will depend on, exactly what the community need is, and thinking about where the unique opportunity is in this community based on the expertise, based on the work that the particular service providers are doing, and kind of based on what's feasible for them.
Okay, great. That's informative. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Did we have any other questions? Okay, so yeah, I'm glad that you brought up a little bit about the CSBS and what they do on campus. So if people want to get in touch with the CSBS, or use, like, you put your contact information in the chat here, it looks like, and that's Pete's email. But what kinds of things, like especially around like Rokwire, what kinds of things, if someone wants to say, come to you with an idea and they have this sort of idea about the technology that they want to do, but they don't really know how to implement it. I mean, how could you help them, get them connected with the right people, maybe within social science, or how does that process work?
Well, there isn't a process right now. So we're still kind of thinking about, the ways in which Rokwire could be utilized as a research platform and the ways in which we can connect various social behavioral science faculty members to the Rokwire team to help make their kind of research streams a reality. But it starts with just by reaching out to us. And, we like to do warm handoffs. So if you're interested in thinking about the ways in which the Rokwire platform could be used for your research, or you're just kind of curious to learn more, I'd say reach out to me directly, or someone else at the CSBS, but I'm the primary contact for that, so I would be the probably most appropriate person. And then we can reach out to the Rokwire team and think about, okay, what's on their agenda, where does this kind of need or desire kind of fit into their broader plan, and what are the ways in which we can start incorporating some of that feedback into what Rokwire is doing. My guess is that over the next year or so, we'll start to think more concretely about a feedback apparatus to start incorporating all that information from the faculty members here on campus in a more systemic way. But my email is always open, and we're always happy to chat with faculty members here that are interested in using Rokwire.
Very good. Any other questions? Okay, Pete also put the link to the CSBS website in the chat, so check that out. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending today, and this is the last seminar of our series. I'll be working on a blog post soon to sort of summarize everything in our series. We've had 7 talks, and so you'll want to check that out, and I'll be advertising that. You can also check out our YouTube playlist, which is on our YouTube channel. So check that out as well for talks you may have missed. And so hopefully, if you're interested in contacting the Rokwire community, I put the contact information in. You can look me up, and you can email me at my email address here, and I can get you in touch. I can maybe onboard you into the community if you're interested, or get you more information about what we're doing. So that's my email address in the chat here. And thank you for attending, and have a good holiday, and be in touch next term. We'll be doing some other activities, and we'll be advertising those things shortly, or next term. So thank you for attending. Thank you, Pete, for your great presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Glad to be here.
All right.